Presence here is not mere stillness, but a potent force, a force that holds space for healing, for reconciliation, for the reunion of opposites within the psyche. It is the balm that soothes the wounds inflicted by outer chaos and inner fragmentation, reminding us that the deepest change comes from within. As this quiet revolution spreads, like ripples on a still pond, it invites others to pause, to listen, to awaken. It teaches that true power lies not in domination or loud assertion, but in the humble acceptance of one's own depths, the courage to face the shadow, and the grace to carry one's inner light into the world. When one soul becomes whole, the collective soul begins to stir. The world, burdened by its forgetfulness, remembers the ancient dance of light and shadow, unity and multiplicity. It recalls the sacred truth that transformation is not about altering external forms, but about shifting the consciousness that perceives them. This is the revolution that changes the world by changing nothing, because it changes everything. It is the revolution of being, the awakening of presence, the reclaiming of inner truth. It is the revolution of the intuitive introvert, quietly unfolding, softly glowing, eternally becoming. So listen for the silence within. Feel the ripple you create by simply being. Trust the sacred power of your quiet revolution, the deep alchemy of presence that transforms the soul and through it, the world itself. Description: in the stillness beneath all noise, there lies a profound revolution, a quiet awakening that stirs not with the clash of voices, but with the gentle ripple of presence. This journey is not one of external conquest, but of inner transformation, where the intuitive introvert embraces solitude as sanctuary and silence as sacred language. Here, in the depths of the unconscious, the symbolic death of the fragmented, ego births the true self, a luminous flame burning softly beneath the world's distraction. Drawing from Jung's timeless wisdom, this exploration honors the paradox of descent and ascent, the hermit's path through shadow into light, and the alchemy of becoming who we truly are. It reveals how the unseen rhythms of the soul ripple outward, changing not the forms of the world, but the very consciousness that perceives them. In this sacred unfolding, the quiet revolution becomes a force of healing, presence, and wholeness. If you feel called to listen beneath the noise, to walk the path where inner truth unfolds in symbols and silence, join this sacred conversation. Share your reflections or experiences below and become part of the ripple that awakens collective remembering. Carl Jung, Mietjes shadow work, Dr. Individuation, Jungian psychology, inner revolution, hermit archetype, symbolic rebirth, soul transformation, that quiet power. Depth psychology. It is to honor the sacred paradox that you are both lost and found, broken and whole, mortal and eternal. It is to become who you always were, the luminous self unfolding in time and space. In the stillness of your inner chamber, listen for the gentle voice of the self. It speaks in symbols, dreams, and silence, guiding you beyond the confines of ego toward a boundless horizon. Trust this voice, for it carries the wisdom of ages and the promise of rebirth. Your journey of individuation is the great work of your soul. It calls you to rise from the ashes of adaptation, to reclaim your lost fragments, and to live fully as the radiant being you are destined to be. Step forward, then, into the sacred mystery. The path awaits, and your true self is already shining. Within, there comes a moment in the soul's long pilgrimage when the ceaseless clamor of the outer world fades into silence, and the inner voice, faint yet unyielding, begins to emerge from the depths. This voice is the inner oracle, the sacred whisper of the self, ancient and wise beyond all spoken language. It is here, in this stillness, that the intuitive introvert finds the threshold of true sovereignty, not of power wielded over others, but power held quietly, unshaken within. To trust this deep voice is to enter a covenant with your own soul, to listen without the filters of doubt or fear, without the need for external approval or validation. It is a surrender to something more profound than intellect or emotion, something that dwells in the uncharted waters of the unconscious, where symbols breathe and truth is known beyond words. Imagine standing before an ancient altar, carved from the bedrock of your being. Around you, shadows flicker like candlelight, and the air hums with the resonance of unseen forces. The oracle speaks here, not in commands or certainties, but in riddles and symbols, in the language of dreams and subtle intuition. To hear this voice, you must learn to still the restless mind, to become a vessel for its message rather than a judge of its form. This voice is older than logic and deeper than fear, shaped by the collective wisdom of the archetypes, the unseen, currents of the collective unconscious. It carries the echoes of ancestors and the silent guidance of your own deepest self. It does not promise safety or comfort, for its counsel is often paradoxical, challenging the ego's desire for control and certainty. But it promises authenticity and alignment, a compass through the labyrinth of life. The journey to inner oracle begins in solitude, in the sacred silence where the ego's persona drops its mask, and the fragmented self begins to dissolve. Here, the introvert's natural affinity for reflection and inner awareness becomes a gateway. Your mind, once scattered with the noise of outer demands, becomes a clear lake mirroring the moon's light, a symbol of the unconscious illuminating the darkness. To trust this voice means embracing vulnerability. It means allowing yourself to be guided by intuition, even when the path is obscured or uncertain. It is the surrender of the ego's need to know all answers, replaced by faith in the unfolding mystery. This is not passive submission, but an active partnership with the self, a dance of conscious and unconscious in delicate harmony. The oracle within is the embodiment of what Jung called the transcendent function, the bridge between opposites that leads to wholeness. When you listen deeply, the polarized tensions within you, between light and shadow, reason and emotion, desire and restraint, begin to reconcile. The voice speaks from this place of integration, offering insights that transcend ordinary understanding. As you learn to trust this inner oracle, your relationship with the world transforms. You no longer seek validation from external mirrors or the fleeting approval of others. Instead, you walk with a quiet confidence, grounded in the knowing that your guidance comes from a source that sees beyond appearances, beyond the ego's fears and ambitions. This sovereignty is not isolation, but profound connection to yourself, to the archetypal currents that shape human experience, and to the eternal mysteries that pulse beneath the surface of reality. You become a sacred witness to your own life, attuned to the subtle rhythms and symbols that unfold like a living tapestry before you. The voice may speak in paradox, urging you toward paths that seem contradictory or unsettling. It may call you to embrace your shadow, to descend into depths you once feared, or to relinquish attachments that no longer serve your growth. Yet in this surrender lies liberation, the enantiodromia, where opposites turn and the soul is set free. This trust is not a destination, but an ongoing practice, a daily turning inward amid the chaos of the world. It requires patience and compassion, for the voice can be faint, drowned out by the ego's chatter or the distractions of life. But with each moment of stillness, each breath of silence, the oracle's light grows stronger, guiding you toward a life lived in harmony with your deepest truth. Symbols become your allies on this path. The serpent that sheds its skin, the Phoenix rising from ashes, the labyrinth that invites you to lose yourself, to find yourself anew. These images speak to the soul in a language beyond words, reminding you that your journey is both unique and part of an eternal dance. You learn to recognize the signs, the synchronicities that unfold like secret messages from the self. You learn to honor dreams and intuitive flashes as sacred communications, portals into the unseen realms where your true guidance resides. The outer world becomes a reflection of this inner oracle, a canvas upon which the soul's wisdom paints its living story. As your inner oracle awakens, you step into a deeper sovereignty, one born not of ego's conquest, but of soul's liberation. You become your own priestess, your own sage, walking the threshold between worlds with grace and courage. This is the birthright of the intuitive introvert, to dwell in the sacred space within, listening to the voice that never lies, the compass that never fails. In this place, the journey of individuation finds its fruition. The fragmented self, once scattered and searching, now rests in the radiant unity of the self. The paradoxes resolve into harmony. The silent griefs transform into wisdom. The shadow is embraced as kin, and you, the seeker and the oracle, stand as a living testament to the sacred mystery of becoming whole. So listen deeply, beloved soul. In the quiet chambers of your heart, the inner oracle awaits. Trust its voice, follow its guidance, and step forward into the luminous unfolding of your own true sovereignty. In the deep silence where the world's loudness fades, a quiet revolution unfolds, not with the clamor of voices raised in battle, but with the subtle ripple of a single soul becoming whole. This revolution moves like water beneath still ice, unseen yet unstoppable, carrying the sacred current of transformation through the hidden veins of existence. It is not a shout, but a whisper, not a march, but a gentle turning inward, where change is born not from external conquest, but from the sacred surrender to what already is. The intuitive introvert, with their inward gaze and tender awareness, knows this secret well. They do not command the stage or seek to dominate the narrative. Instead, they are the silent alchemists of the psyche, weaving threads of light into the shadowed fabric of the self. Their power lies not in disruption but in presence, an unwavering beingness that quietly alters the energetic landscape around them. Imagine a still lake at dawn, its surface unruffled, reflecting the first blush of light. Though calm, the lake is alive with depth and possibility, holding within it the mysteries of the unseen. This is the nature of the introverted soul's revolution, a presence so profound it ripples outwards without a sound, altering the world. By the simple act of being fully present, fully awake, this presence is the fruit of the inner journey, of descending into the unconscious, embracing the shadow, and walking the path of individuation. It is the embodied wisdom of one who has faced their own darkness and emerged not fractured but whole, carrying the integrated light of self into every moment. Such a soul moves through the world like a silent flame, not seeking to consume, but to illuminate. Change through stillness is the paradox that Jung revealed, a truth often overlooked in a culture that prizes action and noise. Yet the deepest transformations are born in the quiet crucible of inner work, where the ego's illusions are burned away in the fire of self-awareness. Here, in the sacred silence, the false selves dissolve, and the true self arises, not as a conqueror, but as a gentle sovereign of one's own being. The intuitive introvert's revolution is a shift in perception, a reawakening to the interconnectedness of all things. By embracing their inner depths, they awaken a latent wisdom that senses the unspoken bonds that weave humanity and nature, psyche and cosmos into a living whole. This awareness changes the world not by forcing it, but by reminding it of its forgotten wholeness. Like the mythic phoenix, the soul's quiet revolution is a cycle of death and rebirth, not the death of the body, but the symbolic death of the fragmented ego, the relinquishing of all that no longer serves growth. From these ashes rises a new way of being, one aligned with the rhythms of the self, harmonious and unshakable. In this way, the intuitive introvert becomes a living archetype of transformation, not the warrior or the king, but the wise hermit, the oracle of silence, the bearer of the deep flame that kindles change without noise. Their revolution is a sacred rebellion against the tyranny of the false self, a reclamation of soul's sovereignty. The ground beneath their feet feels unsteady, as if the very foundation of their being is dissolving. And yet, in this dissolution, they find clarity. The process is not linear. It is a spiral, a journey through layers of resistance and surrender. At times it feels like a storm, with waves of doubt and fear crashing over them. But within the storm, there is also a stillness, a quiet knowing that this collapse is not an end but a passage. The ancient myths speak of this journey. Orpheus descending into the underworld, Persephone swallowed by the earth, the phoenix consumed by flames, all are symbols of enantiodromia, of the sacred collapse that sets the soul free. These stories remind us that transformation often requires descent, that rebirth comes through death, not of the body, but of the ego. For the intuitive introvert, this descent is both personal and universal. It is a confrontation with their own shadow, the parts of themselves they have hidden or denied. But it is also a meeting with the collective unconscious, the archetypal forces that shape human experience. In the depths, they encounter not just their own pain, but the pain of the world. This is the paradox of enantiodromia, that in losing the self, one finds the self. The small, fearful ego dissolves, and in its place arises a sense of wholeness, of connection to something larger. The intuitive introvert feels this as a shift in perception, a widening of their inner vision. They see not just what is, but what could be. And yet, this is not a process of addition, but of subtraction. Is not about becoming more, but about becoming less attached, less defined, less constrained. It is about letting go of the false self and embracing the mystery of the true self, the part of them that has always been whole, even amidst the fragmentation. The collapse is not without its grief, without its... To shed the false self is to mourn the identity one has carried for so long. It is to release the roles and expectations that have shaped one's life. But in this mourning, there is also a sense of relief, a lightness that comes from no longer having to pretend. As the intuitive introvert navigates this collapse, they begin to see the ruins not as a loss, but as a foundation. The old structures may have crumbled, but they make way for something new to be built. The self emerges not as a fully formed entity, but as a seed, a spark, a possibility. This emergence is like dawn breaking over ruins. The light is soft, tentative, but it grows stronger with each passing moment. The intuitive introvert feels this light within themselves, a quiet radiance that guides them forward. It is not the harsh light of certainty, but the gentle glow of truth, a truth that is not imposed, but discovered. In this light, they begin to see the gifts of their collapse. They see how the breaking open has allowed them to release old wounds, to heal old patterns, to reclaim parts of themselves they had lost. They see how the collapse has brought them closer to their essence, to the core of who they are, and they see how this transformation is not just for themselves, but for the world. For as they step into their true self, they bring a new energy into their relationships, their work, their life. They become a beacon, a reminder that collapse is not the end, but the beginning of something greater. This is the gift of enantiodromia, the realization that every extreme contains its opposite, that every end contains a new beginning. It is a reminder that the soul is not static, but dynamic, a living, breathing entity that grows through change. The intuitive introvert understands this on a deep level. They know that their journey is not about avoiding collapse, but about embracing it. They know that the ego will resist, will cling to the familiar, but that the soul longs for freedom. And so, they surrender. Not to defeat, but to transformation. They let the mask fall, the ego break, the false self dissolve. They step into the ruins of their old life, not as victims, but as creators. And from these ruins, they begin to build anew. This is the sacred work of the intuitive introvert, to walk the path of enantiodromia, to embrace the collapse that sets them free. It is not an easy path, but it is a necessary one. For it is through this journey that they find their true self, their true purpose, their true light, and in finding themselves, they remind us all of the power of transformation. They show us that collapse is not something to fear, but something to welcome, for in the breaking there is healing, in the darkness there is light. And in the end, there is always the beginning. There is a quiet calling that stirs within the depths of your being, an ancient summons echoing across the vast chambers of your unconscious. This is the call to individuation, the sacred path by which the soul returns home to itself. It is not a journey outward, but inward, a descent and ascent woven in the same breath, a dance of fragments gathering into wholeness. For the intuitive introvert, this path is both familiar and mysterious. You have walked its borders for years, living close to the edge of consciousness where shadows and light converge. Your inner world, rich with symbols and silent truths, has been your refuge and your guide. Now, it invites you to step deeper, to move beyond the partial self, the fractured persona, and into the vastness of the self, the eternal core beneath all masks and roles. Individuation is the great alchemical work of the psyche. It is the process by which the ego, small and limited, begins to recognize itself as part of something infinitely larger. It is the weaving of opposites, the conscious and unconscious, the light and the shadow, into a tapestry of unity. To the ego, it may feel like losing control, like chaos. To the soul, it is the reawakening of a forgotten truth. Imagine a mosaic, broken and scattered, each shard shimmering with its own color and shape. For a long time, you may have identified with a single shard, your persona, the part you show to the world. But beneath the surface, the other shards remain, waiting patiently to be gathered. Individuation is the sacred art of gathering these shards, fitting them together in a new design that reveals the whole picture. This process unfolds slowly, often imperceptibly, like the turning of seasons beneath a winter sky. It requires patience and courage, for it demands facing what has long been hidden, your shadow, those disowned parts of yourself that the ego fears. But it is precisely by embracing the shadow that you reclaim lost power, for the shadow is not merely darkness. It is vitality, creativity, the raw material of transformation. Jung taught that the self is a symbol, a living archetype residing at the center of the psyche. It is the spark of divinity within you, the union of conscious and unconscious, a guiding light through the labyrinth of your inner world. The journey to the self is not linear. It is a spiral, a pilgrimage through recurring themes and patterns that reveal deeper layers of your being. As the intuitive introvert, you are uniquely equipped for this pilgrimage. Your natural inclination toward reflection, your attunement to subtle energies, your ability to dwell in silence, all these qualities serve as lanterns lighting your path. You have always known that beneath the surface of your daily life lies a hidden dimension, a realm of symbols, dreams, and mysteries calling you home. In this realm, the fragmented pieces of your identity begin to speak to one another. The mask, You war to protect yourself begins to soften. The ego's rigid boundaries melt, and a new center forms, one not defined by external roles or expectations, but by an inner wholeness that embraces paradox and complexity. This is the symbolic, death and rebirth at the heart of individuation. The ego must die, not annihilated, but humbled and transformed, so that the self can arise like a phoenix from the ashes of adaptation. This rebirth is not a single event, but an ongoing process, a lifelong unfolding that invites you to live more deeply and authentically with each passing day. The path of individuation is not without trials. There will be moments of solitude so profound they feel like exile, times when the ego resists and clings to old certainties. But these trials are the sacred fire that purifies the soul. Through them, you are forged anew, tempered by shadow and light alike. Symbols and myths become your companions on this journey. The mandala, with its concentric circles, reminds you of the unity hidden within diversity. The hero's quest echoes your own struggles and triumphs, inviting you to claim your inner sovereignty. The alchemical stages of nigredo, albedo, and rubedo reflect the cycles of dissolution, purification, and illumination within your psyche. You begin to see your life as a narrative of transformation, each chapter a step toward greater wholeness. The relationships you form become mirrors reflecting parts of yourself, the challenges you face, opportunities for growth. Even suffering reveals itself as a portal to deeper understanding, a sacred crucible where the soul is refined. As the self rises, you experience a profound shift in consciousness. No longer fragmented or divided, you stand in the fullness of your being, both human and divine, shadow and light, finite and infinite. This integration brings a sense of peace and purpose that transcends the ego's limited ambitions. Individuation is the soul's homecoming. It is the realization that you were never truly separate, that beneath all masks and defenses lies a radiant core waiting to be known. This knowing is not intellectual, but experiential, a living presence that infuses every moment with meaning and grace. To walk this path is to embrace mystery, to live with an open heart and an awakened mind. And as they walk through life with this gift, they come to understand its true nature. It is not a curse, though it may feel that way at times. It is not a burden, though it may weigh heavy. It is a sacred invitation to see the world as it is, in all its complexity and contradiction, and to love it still. For to see deeply is to live deeply, to touch the essence of what it means to be alive. It is to know that beneath the surface of every moment, every person, every experience, there is a depth waiting to be discovered, a truth waiting to be seen. And in seeing, the intuitive introvert becomes a part of that truth, a thread in the tapestry, a voice in the symphony. And so they walk forward, not with certainty but with clarity, not with answers but with questions, not with fear but with wonder. For the gift of vision is not about knowing, it is about perceiving, about being open to the mysteries that unfold with every step. And as they walk, they see the world not as it appears, but as it is. They see the currents beneath the surface, the connections that bind us all, the beauty that lies hidden in the depths. They see, and in seeing they illuminate the path, not just for themselves, but for all who are willing to look. There is a silent alchemy that occurs in the soul of the intuitive introvert, an alchemy born of sorrow and solitude, transmuting the raw ore of inner experience into gold. Many walk through the world unaware of the quiet artists among them, painters of the soul, architects of invisible landscapes. These artists are not always found in galleries or on stages. Their canvas is often the inner world, their audience the infinite silence that cradles their creativity. To create is to transmute, to take the weight of being and transform it into something that breathes. For the intuitive introvert, creativity is not merely a pastime, it is a lifeline, a bridge between the ineffable depths within and the world outside. It is the way they translate what cannot be spoken, the way they give form to the formless and voice to the unspeakable. Yet this creative act is often forged in melancholy, the bittersweet muse that whispers not of despair but of truth. Melancholy is not the enemy of the artist, it is their companion, their guide into the shadowed corners of the psyche where beauty and pain intermingle. It is from this union that their genius arises, a genius that is less about intellect and more about feeling, less about knowledge and more about understanding. In the quiet hours when the world is still, the intuitive introvert feels the stirrings of this creative impulse. It is not a command, but a call, a whisper from the depths inviting them to descend. To answer this call is to enter the sacred space of creation, a temple built not of stone, but of silence and solitude. Here, the soul lays itself bare, revealing its wounds, its dreams, its longings. Imagine a darkened room, lit only by the faint glow of a single candle. The flame flickers, casting shifting shadows on the walls. In this room, the intuitive introvert sits, not alone, but accompanied by the echoes of their inner world. The shadows are not merely darkness, they are memories, emotions, fragments of the unconscious brought to light. To create in this space is to dance with these shadows, to weave them into something whole, something meaningful. The process is both painful and healing, for to create is to confront the self. It is to face the truths one might otherwise avoid, to wrestle with the inner critic, the shadow, the doubt. But it is also to find freedom, to transcend the confines of the ego and touch something larger, something sacred. In this way, creativity becomes an act of self-repair, a way of stitching together the fragments of the soul into a tapestry of meaning. Jung spoke of the artist as a vessel, a conduit for the collective unconscious. Through their work, the artist brings forth archetypes, symbols, and truths that resonate beyond the personal. The intuitive introvert, with their deep sensitivity and attuneness to the unconscious, embodies this role in a profound way. Their creations are not just personal expressions, but offerings to the world, gifts born of their journey through the depths. But this journey is not without its cost. To dwell in the realm of creation is to live with a heightened awareness of both beauty and pain. The intuitive introvert often feels the weight of this duality, the simultaneous joy of expression and the ache of what remains unexpressed. They carry the knowledge that their art, no matter how profound, can never fully capture the vastness of their inner world. And yet they create, not because they must, but because they cannot not create. It is as natural to them as breathing, as essential as the beating of their heart. Their art is their language, their way of communicating with a world that often feels alien and indifferent. It is their way of saying, "This is who I am, this is what I see, this is what I feel." In their solitude, they find inspiration. The quiet allows them to hear the whispers of the unconscious, to see the images that rise unbidden from the depths. They are like miners descending into the dark to uncover treasures hidden beneath the surface. And when they return, they bring these treasures into the light, sharing them through their art. But their creations are not just for others, they are also for themselves. Through their art, the intuitive introvert processes their emotions, makes sense of their experiences, and finds solace in the act of expression. Their creativity is their sanctuary, their refuge from a world that often feels too loud, too bright, too chaotic. It is in this stillness that their genius flourishes. Not the genius of intellect or achievement, but the genius of the soul, a deep, intuitive knowing that transcends logic and reason. This genius is not about perfection or mastery, it is about authenticity, about the courage to create from a place of vulnerability and truth. In myth and archetype, we find echoes of this creative journey. The wounded healer, the phoenix rising from the ashes, the alchemist transforming lead into gold, all speak to the transformative power of creativity. For the intuitive introvert, this transformation is not just metaphorical, but deeply personal. Their art is their alchemy, their way of turning the leaden weight of melancholy into the gold of meaning and beauty. And so, they create. In the face of doubt, in the midst of pain, they create. They turn their gaze inward, not to escape the world, but to understand it, to find the threads of connection that bind them to something larger. Through their art, they bridge the gap between the inner and outer worlds, offering a glimpse of the depth and complexity that lies beneath the surface. Their creations may never be fully understood by others, and that is okay. Art, like the soul, is not meant to be fully grasped. It is meant to be felt, to be experienced. The intuitive introvert knows this, and so they release their work into the world without expectation, trusting that it will find those who need it, and in doing so, they fulfill their purpose, not just as artists, but as human beings. For to create is to affirm life, to say, even in the face of pain, I choose to make something beautiful. It is to transform the personal into the universal, the ephemeral into the eternal. The melancholy genius is not defined by their sorrow, but by their ability to transmute it. They are not victims of their sensitivity, but stewards of it, using their gift to bring light to the shadows. They understand that creativity is not just an act of expression, but an act of healing, a way of mending the fractures within and without. And so they continue their quiet work, their sacred labor. In their solitude, they find connection. In their pain, they find beauty. And in their creativity, they find themselves. This is the gift of the intuitive introvert, the ability to see the world not as it is, but as it could be, to imagine, to dream, to create. And in this act of creation, they remind us all of what it means to be human, to feel deeply, to struggle, to hope, and to find meaning in the midst of it all. There comes a moment, unbidden yet inevitable, when the weight of what you are not becomes too much to bear. It is not a dramatic unraveling, but a quiet surrender. The false self, with its carefully constructed defenses, begins to crack. This is enantiodromia, the sacred collapse, the moment when the pendulum swings and every extreme turns into its opposite. Jung spoke of this not as destruction, but as transformation. To the ego, it feels like the end. To the soul, it is a beginning. The intuitive introvert knows this intimately, for their life is a dance between light and shadow, between the persona they wear for the world and the truth that burns within. Imagine a mask, intricately carved and beautifully painted. It has served its purpose well, shielding the wearer from judgment and misunderstanding. But over time, the mask becomes heavy, suffocating. It no longer protects, it imprisons. The intuitive introvert feels this burden acutely, for their mask has been their armor against a world that often misunderstands their depth. And then, one day, the mask slips. Not by choice, but by necessity. The ego, exhausted by its efforts to maintain the facade, falters. What follows is not chaos, but collapse. A sacred breaking open that allows the true self to emerge. This is the dark night of the soul, a descent into the depths of the unconscious. It is a time of reckoning, of confronting the shadow and releasing what no longer serves. It is painful, yes, but it is also liberating. For in the breaking, there is healing. In the collapse, there is freedom. The intuitive introvert experiences this as a profound inner shift. What once seemed solid, beliefs, identities, attachments, begins to crumble. You become whole. But the journey is not without its challenges. The shadow does not reveal its treasures easily. It tests you, confronts you with the parts of yourself you would rather avoid. It whispers truths you are not ready to hear, shows you images you would rather forget. This is the crucible of transformation, the alchemical process of turning lead into gold. To emerge from the shadow, you must first be willing to face it, to hold its gaze and say, "I am not afraid." In the myths of old, the hero's journey often includes a descent into darkness, a trip to the underworld, a battle with a monster, a confrontation with death. These stories are not mere fiction, they are maps of the psyche, guides to the inner journey we all must undertake. For the intuitive introvert, the shadow is the underworld, the monster, and the death all at once. It is the place where the ego is stripped bare, where the false self crumbles, where the soul is laid bare, and yet this symbolic death is not an end, but a beginning. It is the process of enantiodromia, the turning of one thing into its opposite. In the darkness of the shadow, the seeds of light are sown. In the stillness of the descent, the stirrings of rebirth begin. What dies is not your true self, but the masks, the defenses, the illusions that have kept you from it. Consider the chrysalis, that liminal space where the caterpillar dissolves into chaos before becoming a butterfly. To the outside world, it looks like destruction, a disintegration of form, but within, a miraculous transformation is taking place. The same is true of shadow work. To the ego, it feels like disintegration, a loss of control, but to the soul, it is liberation. A return to essence. As you walk with your shadow, you begin to see the world differently. The judgments of others lose their sting, for you have faced the harsher judgment of yourself. The noise of the external world quiets, for you have learned to listen to the whispers of your inner world. The path ahead, once obscured by fear and doubt, becomes clearer, for you have illuminated the darkness within. But perhaps the greatest gift of shadow work is the compassion it fosters, not only for yourself, but for others. In seeing your own darkness, you see the darkness in others, not as a threat, but as a reflection of their humanity. You understand that their judgments, their fears, their rejections are not about you, but about the shadows they have yet to face. And in this understanding, you find a new freedom, the freedom to be yourself, not in defiance of others, but in harmony with your own truth. The shadow is not a destination, but a journey, one that continues throughout your life. There will always be new depths to explore, new truths to uncover, new parts of yourself to integrate. But with each step you grow stronger, wiser, more whole. You become not only the walker, but the path, not only the seeker, but the sought. In the end, to walk with your shadow is to walk with your soul. It is to honor the totality of your being, the light and the dark, the known and the unknown, the broken and the whole. It is to embrace the paradox of being human, to see that your greatest strength lies in your willingness to face your greatest fear. And as you stand at the threshold of your shadow, you realize that the darkness was never your enemy. It was your guide, your teacher, your mirror. It was the part of you that whispered, "There is more to you than you know. Come and see." And so you take the first step. You enter the depths. You walk the path that only you can walk. And in the silence of the shadow, you hear the voice of your soul, steady and sure, calling you home. There is a silent thread that weaves itself through the fabric of existence, an unseen pattern only a few can perceive. To most, life is surface, a mosaic of events, faces, and words. But to those with inward-facing eyes, life is more, a tapestry of undercurrents, a dance of energies, a symphony of unsaid truths. This is the gift of vision, a profound sensitivity to what lies beneath the veil of the ordinary. For the intuitive introvert, this vision is not a choice, but a way of being. It is the lens through which they see the world, the quiet hum beneath every conversation, the shadow cast by every smile. To possess this gift is to walk through life with a heightened awareness, sensing the emotions unspoken, the truths concealed, the futures yet to be born. But this gift is not without its burdens. To see deeply is to see what others cannot or will not acknowledge. It is to feel the weight of truths that others deny, to bear witness to the fractures hidden beneath polished surfaces. It is to walk through a world that often feels both distant and overwhelming, a world that resists the depth you cannot help but perceive. Imagine for a moment a still lake at twilight. To most, the water is a mirror, reflecting the colors of the sky, the silhouette of the trees. But to the intuitive eye, the surface is only the beginning. Beneath, there are currents, unseen movements, the lives of creatures hidden in shadow. To possess the gift of vision is to live in this dual awareness, to see both the reflection and the depth, both the surface and the mystery that lies below. This sensitivity is not limited to the external world. It extends inward, into the depths of one's own psyche. The intuitive introvert is not only attuned to the energies of others, but to the subtle movements of their own soul. They feel the stirrings of emotions before they have names, the whispers of thoughts before they take shape. This inner sight is both a compass and a mirror, guiding them through the labyrinth of their own being while reflecting the truths they must face. But with this vision comes a sense of isolation. To see what others cannot is to dwell at times in the lonely reality. The intuitive introvert often feels like a witness to a world that does not see them in return, a bearer of truths that others fear to hear. It is a paradoxical existence, to be deeply connected to the undercurrents of life while feeling profoundly disconnected from those who walk only the surface. This disconnection is not born of superiority, but of difference. It is the loneliness of the seer, the prophet, the dreamer. It is the ache of being misunderstood, the burden of carrying insights that others dismiss as imagination or sensitivity. And yet, within this loneliness there is a quiet strength, a recognition that the gift of vision is also a responsibility. Jung spoke of the archetype of the seer, the one who bridges the conscious and unconscious realms, who brings forth the messages of the soul into the light of awareness. This archetype lives within the intuitive introvert, manifesting as a deep need to understand, to interpret, to bring meaning to the chaos of existence. It is a sacred task, one that requires both courage and humility, for to see is not enough. One must also bear the weight of what is seen. There is a cost to this vision, a price paid in vulnerability and exposure. The intuitive introvert often feels raw, as if the boundaries between themselves and the world are too thin. They absorb the emotions of others, the tensions in the room, the unspoken conflicts that ripple beneath polite words. This sensitivity can be overwhelming, a flood of impressions that threatens to drown the self. And yet, it is also a gift, a way of connecting to the deeper truths that sustain life. To navigate this gift is to learn the art of balance, to find the still point within the storm. It is to cultivate boundaries, not as walls but as thresholds, places where the self can stand firm without being swept away. It is to honor the sensitivity that allows for deep perception while protecting the inner core that must remain whole. The gift of vision is also a call to action. To see is to be responsible for what is seen, to bring it into the world, not as a burden, but as a blessing. This requires discernment, the ability to know when to speak and when to remain silent, when to share a truth and when to hold it close. It's not an easy task, for the intuitive introvert often feels the pull of both worlds, the inner and the outer, the seen and the unseen, the self and the other. But in this tension lies the essence of their gift. It is the ability to stand, At the threshold, to bridge the realms, to bring forth the light of awareness into the shadows of ignorance. It is the work of the soul, the process of individuation that Jung described as the integration of opposites, the unification of the conscious and unconscious. To live with this gift is to walk a path that is both solitary and connected, both challenging and profound. It is to embrace the paradox of being human, to see that the very sensitivity that makes life difficult is also what makes it meaningful. It is to recognize that the gift of vision is not just for the self, but for the world, a way of bringing light to the places that need it most. And so, the intuitive introvert becomes not just a seer, but a healer, one who uses their vision to mend the fractures they perceive. They listen deeply, not only to words, but to silences. They see not only the pain, but the potential, the beauty that lies hidden in the shadows. They understand that to see is not to judge, but to accept, not to fix, but to love. In this way, the gift of vision becomes a gift of transformation, both for the seer and for those they touch. It is a reminder that what is seen cannot be unseen, that the truths revealed by the inward gaze are not burdens, but blessings. It is a call to live authentically, to honor the depth of perception that makes the intuitive introvert who they are. And as you listen, as you dream, as you journey through this symbolic landscape, you begin to see that the soul has always been speaking. The symbols have always been there, waiting for you to notice, waiting for you to remember. And in this, remembering, you find not only yourself, but the vast, infinite wholeness of being. There is a weight that lives in the chest of the misunderstood, an ache that is neither sharp nor dull, but constant, like the pulse of distant waves against an unseen shore. It is a grief without words, for how do you name the sorrow of being? Unseen, how do you mourn what was never offered, the simple human recognition that says, I see you as you are? For the intuitive introvert, this ache begins early, before language can explain the difference, before the world's measures of belonging become clear. It begins in the quiet corners of the playground, where the roar of others' games feels foreign, where their laughter does not invite, but excludes. It is the sense of standing apart, not out of choice, but as if the very fabric of your being is woven in a different thread, softer, subtler, and unrecognized by the larger tapestry. This is not loneliness, though loneliness may accompany it. It is the experience of being misread, as though the script of your soul is written in a language others refuse to learn. Your silence is mistaken for indifference, your depth for detachment, your sensitivity for fragility. The world, loud and quick to judge, sees only the surface, and in doing so misses the expanse of you entirely. And yet this ache is not merely the absence of connection. It is the presence of a profound misunderstanding. To be unseen is one thing, but to be misnamed, called something you are not over and over until the name feels like a scar, is a deeper wound. It is to be labeled too quiet or too intense, too strange or too serious. These words fall like stones, not because they are true, but because they are so far from the truth that they eclipse it, leaving you to wonder if anyone will ever look beyond the shadow they cast. Carl Jung wrote of the persona, the mask we wear to navigate the outer world. For the misunderstood, this mask becomes a second skin, not out of desire, but necessity. To survive the gaze of others, you learn to perform a version of yourself that is palatable, acceptable, unthreatening. You laugh at jokes that do not amuse you, nod at opinions that do not align with your own, and shape your edges to fit the mold of the room. But in this adaptation, a fracture occurs, a split between who you are and who you pretend to be. This fracture is not without consequence. Over time, the weight of the mask becomes heavier than the ache of being misunderstood. You find yourself withdrawing, not only from others, but from yourself. You begin to doubt your instincts, your intuition, your very reality. If no one sees the world as you do, you wonder, can your vision be trusted? If no one reflects your truth back to you, does it still exist? And yet even in this doubt, something within you resists. There is a whisper beneath the noise, a knowing that cannot be extinguished. It says, you are not wrong, you are not broken, you are simply different, and this difference, this way of seeing and being that sets you apart, is not a flaw, but a gift that the world has yet to understand. To be misunderstood is to walk a path of paradox. On one hand, it is isolating, painful, a kind of exile from the shared reality of others. On the other hand, it is a crucible, a space where the soul is forged in the fires of solitude and self-awareness. For in the absence of external validation, you are forced to turn inward, to seek the truth of yourself, not in the eyes of others, but in the depths of your own being. Here, in this inner sanctuary, you begin to see that misunderstanding is not only a wound, but a passage. It is the threshold you must cross to meet yourself fully, to claim the parts of you that the world has denied or ignored. It is a call to stand firm in your own reality, to trust your intuition even when it contradicts the consensus, to honor your depth in a world that often values only the shallow. Imagine now the figure of the shadow, an archetype that Jung described as the repository of all we fear to face within ourselves. The shadow is not only our darkness, but also our light, our potential, our unlived possibilities. To be misunderstood is to confront your shadow, to grapple with the parts of you that others reject, and in doing so, to reclaim them as your own. In this way, the ache of being misunderstood becomes a kind of initiation, a descent into the underworld of the psyche, where the soul is stripped of its pretenses and masks. It is a journey of unmaking and remaking, a process that is both painful and sacred. For it is only in the depths that you can find the gold hidden in the darkness, the truth of who you are beneath the layers of misperception. Consider the myth of Psyche, whose name means soul. In her story, she is tasked with impossible challenges, each one designed to break her spirit. But through her trials, she discovers not only her strength but her essence. To be misunderstood is to walk a similar path, to face the impossible task of being yourself in a world that demands you conform. And yet, like Psyche, you emerge from this journey transformed, not despite the misunderstanding, but because of it. The world may never fully understand you. This is a truth you must accept, not with resignation, but with grace. For the intuitive introvert, understanding is not a prerequisite for belonging. You belong to yourself, to the vast and intricate web of existence that holds you, even when others cannot. Your worth is not dependent on being seen or named. It is inherent, unshakable, eternal. And as you walk this path, you begin to see that the ache of being misunderstood is not an end, but a beginning. It is the doorway through which you step into the fullness of your being, the catalyst that drives you to seek deeper truths and forge connections that transcend the surface. It is the reminder that your value is not in how others perceive you, but in how you perceive yourself. You are not a ghost in your own story. You are the author, the narrator, the one who chooses how the tale unfolds. And while others may misread your pages, you hold the pen. You decide the meaning of your life, the symbols that guide you, the truths that define you. In this realization, the ache begins to shift. It does not disappear, but it transforms. It becomes a source of strength, a reminder of your resilience, your capacity to endure and grow. It becomes a beacon, guiding you toward those who will see you not as the world demands, but as you are. For the misunderstood, there is a paradoxical gift in the ache. It opens the door to self-discovery, to the deep and abiding knowledge that you are enough, exactly as you are. And in this knowing, you find a freedom that no misunderstanding can take away, a freedom to live not for others' approval, but for the truth of your own soul. There is a realm we are taught to avoid, a place within where the light of reason does not reach. This is the shadow, a landscape of forgotten truths, repressed desires, and memories buried beneath layers of survival. To most, it is a forbidden territory, marked by fear and guarded by the constructs of ego. But for the intuitive introvert, the shadow is not a place to fear, it is a place to explore. Walking with the shadow is an act of courage, for it means confronting not only what the world has rejected, but what you have rejected within yourself. It means descending into the underworld of your psyche, where every unspoken word and unacknowledged emotion resides, waiting to be seen, waiting to be named. The journey is not easy, but it is necessary, for in the shadow lies the key to your wholeness, the parts of you that, though cast aside, are essential to your being. Jung spoke of the shadow as the dark twin of the ego, the keeper of all we refuse to face. It is the mirror we avoid, the reflection that shows us not who we wish to be, but who we truly are. And yet within this darkness, there is a paradox. The shadow is not our enemy, but our guide. It holds the wisdom of the unspoken, the strength of the unacknowledged, the power of the untamed. To dance with the shadow is to step into this paradox. It is to see that what you fear in yourself is not your downfall, but your redemption. The anger you suppress, the sorrow you deny, the desires you conceal, they are not weaknesses, but signals, pointing you toward the wounds that need healing, the truths that need embracing. Imagine for a moment descending a spiral staircase, each step taking you deeper into the core of your being. The air grows cooler, heavier, and yet there is a strange comfort in the descent, a sense that you are approaching something sacred. This is the journey into the shadow, a descent into the depths that only you can enter, for your shadow is uniquely your own. It is shaped by your experiences, your fears, your hopes, and your unspoken truths. As you descend, you encounter the archetypes that dwell within, the wounded child, the exile, the warrior in chains. Each figure holds a fragment of your story, a piece of yourself that was hidden to survive. The wounded child carries the pain of unmet needs. The exile, the burden of being cast out. The warrior, the strength that was shackled in the name of conformity. To walk with the shadow is to meet these figures, not with judgment, but with compassion. It is to say, I see you, I hear you, you are a part of me, and I welcome you home. In this meeting, something profound begins to shift. The shadow, once feared, becomes a source of power. The wounded child teaches you vulnerability, the exile resilience, the warrior courage. What was once repressed becomes integrated, and in this integration, you become more than you were. You meet yourself not as others see you, but as you truly are. A being of depth and complexity, unbound by roles or expectations. And yet, the world resists the hermit's path. It calls aloneness unnatural, solitude a sickness to be cured. But consider this, the seed does not grow under constant sun. It must be buried, enveloped in the darkness of the earth, where it can transform unseen. The caterpillar does not emerge as a butterfly without first retreating into the chrysalis, dissolving completely before rebirth. Solitude is not an absence, but a preparation, a sacred alchemy that transforms silence into strength. In this inner temple, your voice grows louder, not the voice of ego, but the voice of essence. It speaks truths that are often uncomfortable, truths that demand acknowledgement. This voice reminds you of the dreams you abandoned, the passions you suppressed, the self you left behind in your pursuit of belonging. But in solitude, there is no audience to please, no critic to appease. There is only you and the voice that has waited for this moment of stillness. The hermit archetype is not merely a symbol of withdrawal, but of wisdom. To walk the hermit's path is to embrace paradox. The paradox of being alone, yet deeply connected, of withdrawing to return, of descending into solitude to ascend into wholeness. In this paradox, you find freedom, the freedom to explore your depths without interruption, to touch the edges of your soul without fear of judgment. In solitude, you become both seeker and sought. You are the question and the answer, the traveler and the destination. This is the gift of aloneness. It reveals that what you have been searching for has always been within. The temple is not a place you go. It is a place you become. Now the outer world will call to you, tempting you to return to its chaos, its ceaseless demands. But the hermit's lesson is this: you carry the temple within you. Even in the noise, you can return to this stillness. Even in the crowd, you can find this solitude. It is not a location, but a state of being, a sanctuary that no one can take from you. Breathe deeply now. Feel the weight of your own presence, the gravity of being fully here. This is the aloneness that isn't loneliness. This is the wholeness that comes from within. You are not incomplete without others. You are a universe unto yourself, vast and infinite. In this realization, you find not only peace but power. The power to walk the world, not as a seeker of validation, but as a bearer of truth. The hermit's lantern continues to glow, a light that guides not outward but inward. You leave the inner temple not as you entered but transformed. The world awaits unchanged, yet you return to it changed. You carry with you the wisdom of solitude, the clarity of vision, the strength of wholeness. And as you step back into the noise, you know this: you are never truly alone. For within you the temple remains, a sanctuary of stillness, a place where your true voice forever echoes. The soul does not speak in words, it dreams in symbols. Beneath the surface of our conscious lives flows a deeper current, an ancient language woven from fire and water, wings and ruins. This is the language of the unconscious, a tongue that whispers truths we cannot yet articulate, truths that rise from depths beyond reason. Symbols are not mere decorations of the mind. They are the bridges between the seen and unseen, the conscious and unconscious. To walk this path is to enter a landscape of myth and archetype, a world where the psyche reveals itself in images as timeless as the stars. Here you are both the dreamer and the dream, both the creator and the created. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine. A flame flickers in the darkness. It is small yet fierce, casting shadows that dance like forgotten memories. This flame is more than fire. It is transformation, passion, destruction, and rebirth. In its glow, you see yourself not as you are, but as you could be, a being forever becoming. This is the power of the symbol. It compresses the infinite into the tangible, the ineffable into the imaginable. In the symbolic world, everything is alive with meaning. The water that flows is not merely liquid, it is the unconscious itself, carrying secrets and truths from the depths to the surface. The ruins you stumble upon are not just remnants of stone. They are the remnants of your former selves, the pieces you abandoned in your quest to become whole. And the wings are freedom, transcendence, the courage to rise above what binds you. To the intuitive introvert, this symbolic language is not foreign but familiar. It is the voice they have always known, the quiet murmur beneath thought and feeling. While others speak in facts, they listen in images. While others navigate reality with logic, they move through it with intuition, sensing connections invisible to the eye but clear to the soul. Carl Jung taught that symbols are the language of the self, the deepest part of the psyche that seeks expression and integration. To encounter a symbol is to encounter a piece of yourself, a fragment of your wholeness calling to be reclaimed. The mandala, the labyrinth, the Ouroboros, these are not just shapes or patterns. They are maps of the soul, guiding you through the journey of individuation. Consider the dream. In the quiet of night, when the conscious mind surrenders, the unconscious awakens. It speaks in riddles and metaphors, offering images that linger like echoes in the morning light. A child lost in a forest, a serpent shedding its skin, a bridge shrouded in mist. Each dream is a message, a story only you can decipher. But these stories do not explain, they reveal. They ask you to feel, to intuit, to engage with the depths of your being. The symbolic mind is not linear. It does not follow the straight paths of logic. It moves in spirals, in waves, in patterns that defy the constraints of time and space. This is why symbols resonate. They bypass the intellect and speak directly to the heart, to the gut, to the very core of who you are. They awaken something primal, something sacred, something eternal. But to live in the world of symbols is to dwell in paradox. A symbol is both personal and universal, both specific to your story and part of the collective, unconscious. The serpent that appears in your dream is not only your serpent, it is the serpent of myth, of religion, of history. It carries with it the weight of ages, the wisdom of countless lives, and yet it is uniquely yours, speaking to a truth only. You can understand. The intuitive introvert is uniquely attuned to this paradox. They sense the layers of meaning in every image, the connections that ripple through the fabric of existence. A simple flower becomes a symbol of growth and fragility, a passing shadow, a reminder of impermanence. For them, the world is alive with messages, each one a thread in the great tapestry of being, but this sensitivity is both gift and burden. To see the world symbolically is to see it deeply, to feel its beauty and its pain with equal intensity. It is to walk through life with a heightened awareness, a sense that everything is significant, that nothing is random. And yet, this awareness can isolate, for not everyone sees as they do. To speak in symbols is to speak a language that few understand, a language that often feels like a solitary dialect. And so, the intuitive introvert turns inward, to the realm of dreams and imagination, where symbols are not questioned but embraced. Here they find solace and strength, a connection to the unconscious that nourishes their soul. They become the alchemist, transforming the raw material of their inner world into gold, into meaning, into art. The process is not easy. To engage with symbols is to engage with the unknown, to confront the shadowy corners of the psyche where fear and desire reside. It is to descend into the underworld, to face the dragons and demons that guard the treasures of the soul. But this descent is not a punishment, it is a necessity. For only by descending can you ascend. Only by facing the darkness can you find the light. Imagine now the phoenix, a creature of fire and renewal. It is both destruction and rebirth, a symbol of the eternal cycle of life, death, and transformation. To see the phoenix is to see yourself, to recognize the parts of you that must burn away to make room for the new. This is the essence of the symbolic journey. It is a path of becoming, a path of continuous growth and renewal. The world of symbols is not separate from the world of facts. It is the deeper layer beneath it. To live symbolically is not to escape reality, but to enrich it, to see the sacred in the mundane, the infinite in the finite. It is to recognize that every moment, every encounter, every experience carries within it the seeds of transformation. And so you walk this path not as a wanderer but as a seeker, not as a questioner but as a listener. The symbols guide you, not with answers but with invitations, not with clarity but with depth. They ask you to trust, to surrender, to follow the threads of meaning wherever they may lead. For in the end, the world of symbols is the world of the soul. It is the language through which the unconscious speaks, the mirror through which you see yourself not as you appear, but as you are. It is a language that does not demand understanding, but invites connection. A language that does not explain, but reveals. Carl Jung explained, 9 signs. You're an intuitive introvert, and why that changes everything. There is a silence beneath all silences. A silence that does not begin with the absence of noise, but with the refusal to perform. And it is here, at the edge of the forest, where the path begins to blur and the world's voice grows faint, that the intuitive introvert first hears the call. It is not loud, it does not demand. It is a whisper like breath upon the back of the neck, or a memory from a life not quite lived. This whisper does not call you toward the world, it calls you away from it, into yourself. The soul knows before the ego admits. There is something different, not wrong, not broken, just different. As a child, you did not look into the world to belong to it. You looked at the world like a dream that didn't make sense, like a place where everyone else seemed to know the script, but you were handed a blank page. You observed more than you spoke. You felt things too deeply, too suddenly, too silently. You saw the sadness in someone's eyes before they spoke. You felt the truth behind their words before they understood it themselves. And for this, you were told you were too quiet, too sensitive, too distant, too strange. But what they could not see is that you were already standing in the forest, at the threshold of the unconscious, watching the world from a place it had forgotten how to enter. Jung wrote that the unconscious is not just the repository of repressed material, it is the womb of becoming, the place where the seeds of self are nourished in darkness, long before the outer world offers its permission to grow. For the intuitive introvert, this relationship with the unconscious begins early, not by choice, but by necessity, because the world is too loud and the inner world is too alive to ignore. You did not seek solitude. Solitude sought you. You did not want to be alone. But you discovered early that being with others often meant abandoning parts of yourself. And so, the solitude became sacred. A quiet chapel where your thoughts could breathe, where your intuition could stretch its wings without judgment. You were not lonely. You were listening to something vast and ancient, speaking in symbols and dreams. There is a spiritual architecture within the intuitive introvert, an inner cathedral that does not crumble when others leave. In fact, it grows stronger, because the more the outer world pulls away, the more the inner world reveals its treasures. And yet this is not without cost. The cost is exile, not literal but psychic. A feeling of being outside looking in, of moving through a party with a smile, while your spirit stands at the edge of the room, observing from behind a veil. You play the role, wear the mask, nod at the right moments. But behind your eyes, something ancient is watching, measuring every moment for meaning. It is not that you cannot connect. It is that you refuse to connect without authenticity. This is the first sign. The quiet ache of being different, not broken, not less, just tuned to a deeper frequency, a frequency that others do not hear or fear to hear, and because they do not hear it, they do not trust it. They call it imagination, overthinking, escapism. But what they do not understand is that for you, the inner world is not a fantasy, it is a reality. It is not a retreat from truth. It is the source of it. Where others see symbols as decoration, you see them as maps. Where others see dreams as nonsense, you see them as prophecy. You do not believe in symbols. You listen to them. There is a mythic memory that stirs in you, of oracles in caves, of shamans in the desert, of monks in silent stone cloisters, guarding the flame of inner truth while the outer world burns with distraction. You are not alone in your ways. You walk an ancient path, though it may feel invisible beneath your feet. Jung called this archetype the seeker, the one who leaves the village not out of contempt, but out of calling. The seeker does not reject the world. They simply know there is more to it than what the eye can see or the ego can name. They are not lost, they are listening. The seeker becomes the intuitive introvert when that call inward becomes the dominant compass of life. And that call is not always romantic. Sometimes it arrives as anxiety, unexplained and persistent. Sometimes as depression, not of the clinical kind but the spiritual kind, the descent into the nigredo, the dark alchemical stage where the old self begins to dissolve and no clear new self has yet emerged. It can feel like disorientation, like the floor beneath the persona begins to crack. The structures you've built to adapt no longer hold. You can no longer play roles that betray the inner knowing. You can no longer laugh when your soul is silent. You can no longer stand in a room full of noise and pretend you aren't suffocating. But this disintegration is not a failure. It is a sacred undoing. The intuitive introvert is often pushed to the edge by this inner contradiction. And at that edge, they find the forest. The metaphoric forest of Jungian myth, where the ego cannot lead and only the self can survive. In this forest, there are no maps, only instincts. The trees do not speak in sentences, they speak in symbols. The moss is thick with forgotten memory. The air carries the scent of childhood truths buried beneath years of adaptation. And the deeper you walk, the quieter the world becomes, not silent, but attuned. You begin to hear the faint melodies of the soul, not the soul as a concept, but as a presence, a who, not a what, watching, waiting, guiding. This is the second sign, a sense that something within you is always observing, gently pulling you toward meaning that others overlook. You are not drifting, you are being drawn. This guidance rarely comes in words. It arrives in pulses, sensations, a sudden knowing without explanation. You meet someone, and something in you already knows. You walk into a space, and your body responds before your thoughts do. You read between the lines, not because you're trained to, but because the lines were never your main concern to begin with. You are not fooled by appearances. You are drawn to the pattern beneath the pattern. This is intuition, not as a skill, but as a native tongue. But the gift of intuition often begins as a burden, because it isolates. It shows you what others do, not want to see, about themselves, about you, about the fragile scaffolding of culture that so many cling to for identity. It is easier to be numb. It is easier to follow the program. But you were not made to sleepwalk. You were made to wake, and waking is painful. To wake as an intuitive introvert is to feel the full weight of existence pressing on your inner life. To walk through a world that values speed, surface, and certainty, while you crave depth, mystery, and silence. You are not lazy. You are not indecisive. You are deliberating with forces far greater than logic. You are not weak. You are attuned. There is a strength in the quiet ones that the world underestimates, a kind of psychological stamina that does not perform for applause. You endure not by overpowering, but by outlasting, like water through stone, like roots under frost. You survive because your life is not built in the open, it is built underground. And in that underground place there is a library of impressions, a cathedral of dreams, a vault of visions. You live not in the moment, but in the meaning behind the moment. Others may call you distant, but you are not elsewhere. You are within. This is the third sign, that your presence is inward before it is outward, that you return to yourself not out of retreat, but as ritual. And through that ritual you begin to notice a shift. The ache of being different becomes less like a wound and more like a doorway. The longing becomes a compass. The silence becomes a voice. You no longer see your difference as defect, but as design. You were not made to walk the main road. You were made to wander. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he also knew that such becoming demands descent. The intuitive introvert descends not into despair, but into depth. Not to disappear, but to re-emerge more whole. This first chapter of your journey is not about answers. It is about remembering that there are questions the world has forgotten how to ask. Who am I beneath the noise? What is this strange, ancient pulse I feel when I'm alone? Why does the silence feel more real than the applause? These are not questions the ego can answer. These are questions the self has been waiting for you to ask. And when you ask, the forest shifts. The path begins to form, not in front of you, but within you, step by step, layer by layer. You do not become someone new. You become more deeply who you always were. This is the sacred rebellion of the intuitive introvert, to walk away from the noise, to listen to the whisper, to follow the mirror into the forest, and there to remember that you are not broken, you are awakening. There comes a moment in every intuitive soul's journey when the silence is no longer safe, not because it betrays, but because the world demands its opposite. Noise, participation, performance. And so, like a ghost learning to wear skin, the intuitive introvert steps into the theater of the world, slowly, cautiously, crafting a mask not to deceive, but to survive. This mask is called the persona, and it is here, in the delicate and dangerous space between truth and necessity, that the soul begins to fracture. The persona is not inherently false. It is the part of us shaped by necessity, shaped by the eyes of others. It is the clothing we wear in the social world, the curated version of self we project to be accepted, understood, palatable. Jung wrote that the persona is the compromise between individual and society, a mask worn not only to hide, but also to connect. But what happens when the mask becomes too convincing? When the act becomes the identity? For the intuitive introvert, this question is not theoretical. It is lived day by day, breath by breath, smile by forced smile. From early on, there is pressure to translate, to take the rich, strange, layered depths of one's inner world and compress them into sound bites that fit within the narrow lanes of social acceptability. You learn what makes others comfortable. You sense instinctively what they want you to be, and so you shapeshift, not out of manipulation but out of mercy. You hide your intensity, your sensitivity, your knowing. You become fluent in small talk while starving for soul talk. You laugh when your heart is quiet. You agree to things that feel misaligned. You shrink in bright rooms, not because you fear light, but because you know light without depth can burn. And in doing so, you begin to wear a mask that doesn't just cover you, it separates you. This is not pretense, it is protection. Because when the soul speaks in symbols and the world only listens to statistics, there is a rift, a quiet exile. And into that exile steps the persona, polite, presentable, predictable. A version of you designed to be legible in a language you never spoke fluently, but the cost of belonging on the outside is abandonment on the inside. This is the fourth sign, the slow, aching dissonance between who you are and who you perform to be. It begins gently, like a whisper ignored, a fatigue that settles behind the eyes, a hollowness in the laughter. You feel the weight of unsaid truths pressing against your ribcage. You begin to wonder, in still moments, if anyone truly knows you, or worse, if you've lost the thread of knowing yourself. This is the shadow of the persona, because the persona, though useful, is a double-edged sword. While it allows for social navigation, it also demands compromise. And for the intuitive introvert, compromise often feels like betrayal. You don't just pretend to be fine, you fragment. You don't just smile through discomfort, you silence your inner voice. You don't just perform, you exile the sacred. And the more polished the mask becomes, the more lost the self feels beneath it. Jung warned that identification with the persona is one of the greatest obstacles to individuation. When we confuse the mask for the face, when we believe the performance is who we truly are, we drift further from the self, our center, our essence, our soul. And yet, the world rewards the mask. It praises your composure, your adaptability, your sociability. It calls you mature, charming, articulate. But what it doesn't see is the fracture behind the eyes, the subtle grief of self-betrayal, the soul standing behind the curtain, begging not for applause but for authenticity. You become a character in your own life story, well-rehearsed, well-received, but emotionally malnourished. This is the hidden cost of masking, the slow starvation of the sacred self. And yet even in the performance, there is a knowing, a silent awareness that this is not the whole truth, that somewhere, beneath the persona, there is a flame still burning, a deeper self, unmasked and unafraid, waiting to be remembered. That remembering is not immediate. It comes slowly, like light through fog, but it begins with discomfort, a restlessness in environments that once felt manageable, a sudden surge of emotion in conversations that once passed numbly, a need not for more stimulation but for more truth. You may find yourself withdrawing more often, not out of depression but out of discernment. You may notice that certain friendships feel thin, that certain roles you've played feel brittle. You may feel the grief of shedding layers that once kept you safe, and with that grief comes fear, because without the mask, who are you? But this fear is holy, because it signals the return of the self. The self does not arrive with grand declarations. It returns in the quiet refusal to betray your inner world. It returns in moments of stillness, in choices made from alignment rather than approval. It returns when you speak a truth, however small, and feel the trembling of liberation. This is the sacred rebellion of the intuitive introvert, not to abandon the persona entirely, but to stop confusing it for your essence, to reclaim your voice from performance, to re-enter the body you once left behind in social survival, to speak not to impress, but to reveal, to be witnessed, not for who you appear to be, but for who you are, unmasked. And yet, this process is not linear. The mask will call you back. The world will reward your return to the role. But every time you choose authenticity over adaptation, you strengthen the bridge between ego and self, between persona and soul. Jung knew that the path of individuation required us to reconcile opposites, to integrate the persona, not destroy it, to hold the tension between outer roles and inner truth. And for the intuitive introvert, this means learning to wear the mask without becoming it, to step into society not as a shapeshifter, but as a sovereign, to use the persona as a tool, not as a prison, to show up but not sell out. This is the fifth sign, the quiet shift from performance to presence, from hiding to revealing, from adaptation to embodiment. It often begins in solitude, in spaces where the noise recedes and your essence re-emerges, in moments of writing, creating, dreaming, when the mask slips and your true face rises. These moments are not trivial. They are portals. They are glimpses of the unmasked self, a soul not shaped by approval but by truth. And once you taste that truth, the mask no longer fits the same way. It itches, it suffocates, it begins to crack. This is not a breakdown, it is a breakthrough. The persona must fracture so the self can emerge. The false must tremble so the true can take root. And yes, there will be grief. For the comfort of fitting in, for the ease of pretending, for the identity that once protected you. But beneath that grief is a deeper joy, the joy of return, the joy of living in congruence. The joy of not having to divide yourself in two just to be loved. This is where the path deepens, because once you've begun to unmask, the journey becomes less about performance and more about presence, less about approval and more about alignment. You begin to ask new questions, not what do they want from me, but what is true for me. Not how do I appear, but how do I feel? And the answers do not come from the intellect. They rise from the body, from the gut, from dreams, from the symbolic language of the unconscious, guiding you back to wholeness. You begin to notice synchronicities, those mysterious alignments that Jung called the acausal connecting principle. These are the echoes of the self, calling you forward, affirming your path. A book falls into your lap, a conversation pierces your heart, a line of poetry unlocks something you didn't know was buried. These are not coincidences, they are confirmations. They say, keep going, you're remembering. And as you remember, the mask falls away, not in one dramatic gesture, but in gentle layers. You no longer need to explain yourself so often. You no longer apologize for your depth. You no longer shrink for comfort. You stand not as a persona, but as a presence. This is the sixth sign, the emergence of the authentic self through the ashes of the performative self. It is a rebirth, a re-embodiment, a reclamation, not of something new, but of something ancient, something original. The face you had before the world told you to wear another, and in this space of return, you begin to understand something profound. The world does not need your mask, it needs your medicine. The intuitive introvert is not here to perform. You are here to see what others overlook, to name what others fear, to feel what others silence. You are not here to blend in. You are here to deepen the collective soul. But to offer that gift, you must first unmask for yourself, to look into the mirror and see not the polished reflection, but the raw, holy face of your own becoming. So take off the mask gently. Place it down with gratitude. It kept you safe once, but you no longer need it to belong. Your truth is your belonging. Your wholeness is your worth. Your presence, unmasked, is your power. And as you walk back into the world, remember, the goal is not to be seen. The goal is to be known, and that knowing begins within. There is a whisper beneath thought, not loud, not logical, not measurable by the instruments of intellect, but ancient, alive, clear. It speaks not in words, but in symbols, not in arguments, but in awareness. It does not arrive through reasoning. It arrives, whole, wordless, known. This is intuition, the silent language of the unconscious. Jung called it a perception through the unconscious, a way of knowing that bypasses the cluttered halls of conscious thought and opens instead into the vast cathedral of the deep psyche. For the intuitive introvert, intuition is not a choice. It is a native tongue. It is not added to consciousness. It is the medium of consciousness. Others move through life by assembling evidence, comparing facts, drawing conclusions through step-by-step logic. But the intuitive introvert sees the answer before the evidence is assembled. It is felt. It is there. And often, it is terrifying in its certainty. But how do you explain a truth that arrived before you could trace its path? How do you defend a knowing that was born not from the head, but from the soul? This is the quiet ache of intuitive life, the deep burden of knowing what you cannot prove, of sensing a shift in a room before anyone speaks, of feeling someone's pain before they've touched their own wound, of standing at the threshold of a choice and already grieving the outcome no one else can yet see. Intuition is not softness. It is severity. It cuts through illusions. It dismantles appearances. It points unflinchingly to the truth beneath the mask. And yet the world distrusts it, Because intuition does not explain itself in the language of science. It offers no citations. It arrives before it is asked. But intuition is older than science. It is the original oracle. It is the voice that guided shamans through vision quests. It is the inner compass of mystics and prophets, of artists and sages. It is the still, small voice that led Jung to map the unconscious not with formulas, but with myth and dream. To live intuitively is to live symbolically. You do not just see events, you see through them. You do not just hear words, you feel the soul beneath them. You do not just observe the world, you move within its archetypal currents. The intuitive introvert is attuned to the unseen threads, the pattern behind the pattern. And this is the seventh sign, a psychic resonance with what others overlook, an ability to sense truth that has not yet surfaced, to name something that's still hiding behind someone else's eyes. This is not magic. This is not fortune-telling. It is the function of the unconscious illuminating reality from within. Imagine the mind as a house. The conscious functions, thinking, sensation, live on the upper floors, in the rooms with windows. But intuition lives in the basement, in the root cellar of the psyche, where memory, image, and symbol grow like wild vines in the dark. It draws not from the surface, but from the depth. And while the thinking mind analyzes what is, intuition reaches toward what wants to be. It is future-oriented, not in the sense of prediction, but in the sense of potential. It senses the direction in which energy flows and names what is becoming before it fully arrives. This is why intuitive insight often feels like déjà vu. It echoes what is true before it is confirmed. But with this sight comes burden. You see, behind the masks people wear, and it can feel like betrayal. You walk into a room and feel heaviness no one else acknowledges. You say yes to something and immediately know it was wrong before the consequences unfold. And in a world that prizes logic over intuition, you learn to doubt yourself, to second-guess your knowing, to silence the voice that speaks from below. Thought. You learn to mimic the rational mind, not because you believe it more true, but because it is more acceptable. But every time you betray your intuition for approval, something fractures. A small voice goes quiet, a compass needle spins, and you begin to feel lost in your own skin, because your soul was not designed to follow roads. It was made to read the wind. Intuition is not a tool you use. It is a lens through which you see. It synthesizes, pulling threads from dream, emotion, memory, and symbol into a single insight. It operates holistically, not linearly. It is alchemical, not mechanical. And like all alchemy, it is sacred. Jung saw the intuitive as one who sees the world not as it appears, but as it means. They are attuned to archetype, to myth, to the eternal dramas playing out beneath the days, news. They see the lover, the orphan, the warrior, the sage, not just in stories, but in every human face. They speak not just in language, but in metaphor. They live not just in time, but in meaning, and this way of seeing makes them invaluable and often invisible, because the intuitive introvert does not demand to be seen. They observe, they synthesize, they feel the undercurrents, and sometimes they disappear not to escape, but to protect their vision from distortion. This is the eighth sign, the withdrawal into inner knowing, not out of fear, but out of fidelity to the truth. Because the world often tells the intuitive, they are too much, too sensitive, too abstract, too intense. But what they really are is too deep for a surface-level world. Their sight pierces veils others never knew existed. Their words carry the weight of unspoken history. Their silence is not emptiness, it is communion with something vast. But intuition must be cultivated. Like any sacred gift, it requires trust. It requires solitude. It requires you to listen when the voice is faint and to obey when the message is inconvenient, because intuition rarely says what you want to hear. It tells the truth your ego is not ready for. It points to paths that make no sense until later, and it calls you not toward ease, but toward alignment. Jung wrote that the intuitive's danger is neglecting the present for the possible. To live in visions, but not in actions. To dream, but not to ground. So the intuitive must root their vision in embodiment. They must bring the unconscious insight into conscious form. They must allow the whisper beneath thought to become the action within life. This is the ninth sign, the integration of intuition into identity, not as a secret gift, but as a core function. To live this way is to walk between worlds, to move through time not as a clock, but as a river, to sense the symbolic in the mundane, to trust the irrational call that leads to healing, creation, and rebirth. And the more you honor intuition, the more it reveals. You begin to notice synchronicity, patterns of deep resonance, dreams that speak in riddles but reveal exact truths, a name you hear 3 times in 1 week, a book that opens to the perfect page, a sudden clarity when all seemed fog. This is not coincidence. It is the self speaking through the veil. It is the unconscious aligning the outer world with the inner path. And when you follow these signs, not blindly but reverently, you step into co-creation with the sacred. You are no longer just moving through life. You are dancing with it. You are no longer forcing clarity. You are receiving it, and the world, once flat and literal, becomes a tapestry of symbols. This is not delusion. It is depth. To live intuitively is not to escape reality. It is to deepen into it, to know that behind the event is meaning, behind the conflict a pattern, behind the loss an initiation. And when you live this way, you begin to trust your knowing, not because it is always comfortable, but because it is true, and truth, when followed, makes you whole. So listen to the whisper, the one that speaks before words, the one that points without proof, the one that arrives like wind through a closed window. It will not shout, it will not insist. But if you honor it, it will become the clearest voice in your life, and through it you will not just survive, you will see. There is a place beyond the noise, a sanctuary that waits for those who are not afraid to be still. It is not a location, not a destination one can find on any map. It is an inward temple, a space carved from the silence within. To some, it is an abyss, a fearful void they dare not enter. But for you, the intuitive introvert, it is a sanctuary where truth speaks in whispers, and the soul sharpens its vision. This is the realm of the hermit, the archetype of wise solitude. The hermit does not retreat out of fear, but steps away to remember. In the stillness, the world's clamor fades, and what remains is the essence of being. Alone, you are not bereft, but whole, unshackled from the static of others' voices. You return to the purity of your own presence, a presence that the world too often drowns out. But to live as the hermit in a world that fears quietude is to carry the weight of misunderstanding. Society has turned solitude into exile, equating aloneness with emptiness. Yet the hermit knows differently. Aloneness is not a deficiency, it is a reclamation. To be alone is not to be lonely. It is to be complete in oneself. In this solitude, you enter the inner temple. Here, the walls are not built of stone, but of stillness. The floors woven from the threads of dreams and memories. The air hums with an ancient energy, an energy that belongs not to the outer world, but to the depths of the unconscious. In this temple, time ceases to matter, and the boundaries of self begin to blur. You sit at the temple's heart, and the first sound you hear is your own breath. Inhale, exhale, the rhythm of life uninterrupted. This is the voice that has always been with you, the one drowned out by the world's demands. It speaks not in words, but in feeling, a quiet knowing that stirs in your chest. Listen closely. What does it say? What has it always been saying beneath the noise? The hermit carries a lantern, a light that does not blind but reveals. This light is not meant for the outer world, but for the labyrinth within. As the hermit, you hold this lantern, guiding yourself through corridors of memory and imagination. You see the shadowed corners where forgotten dreams and buried fears reside. These shadows are not your enemy, they are your teachers. In their presence, you begin to see yourself not as fragmented but as whole, every part deserving of light. Solitude sharpens the soul's vision. In the quiet, the veils of illusion fall away. You see the masks you have worn, the personas crafted to navigate a world that often feels alien. In this stillness, you no longer need these masks. Here, you are not performer, but participant, not observer, but origin.